Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and I'm going to get on a bit of a soapbox today. I apologize in advance for that, but this is something that I keep seeing, and it's something that repeats over and over again, and I believe and feel that I just need to say something about it. What I want to talk about today is hypocrisy. If you are not familiar with hypocrisy or the term hypocrite, it is something that is mentioned in the Gospels of the Christian Bible, and it is a very, shall we say, derisive term that Jesus uses to refer to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who, according to the tales, were the religious leaders during that day. In fact, one of the things I heard a lot growing up was how whenever Jesus had something very unpleasant to say, he always said it to the religious leaders. And it's something that if I were still a Christian, I would begin to wonder what Jesus would say about many of the religious leaders that we have today. I have seen it with groups that define themselves as being very conservative Catholic. These are individuals who believe that the Pope no longer has authority over them because the Pope does not abide by Catholic beliefs anymore. It's something that I see a lot with the New Apostolic Reformation and the Heritage Foundation that are doing a lot of things to mess around with our political system and are a driving force behind many things that are disrupting our nation today with the current Trump presidency. And one of the things that has always bothered me, and it was something that I really struggled to reconcile when I was a Christian, is how you have people who are in these positions of power, and especially for something as, dare I even say, important as a spiritual authority. And these people would be those that Jesus would still be admonishing as hypocrites. I didn't realize this was going to be coming up here. I was just having a conversation last night with Ben after we had our workout. And one of the things that Libby and I have talked about, and I was just sharing with him, because Ben and our friends Katie and Brandon, they all attend the same church, and they are devout Christians, and these are some of the most loveliest people that I have ever had the opportunity to interact with. And when we got done with our workout, they have been remodeling their sanctuary. And so every now and again, Ben's like, hey, you want to come take a look at the progress that's been made? And so he was showing me the progress that they had been making. And there are so many times when I will go to their church and I see that it is being used all the time. They have a group of scouts that come by and use their youth center every single week. Lately, there's been a girls basketball team that has been coming in and practicing in their gymnasium. I'll show up to do some workouts, and as I'm heading down the stairs, I'll just hear basketballs just being bounced around and the squeaks of shoes as they're moving around the court. Things that I'm very familiar with hearing from my time playing basketball as a young kid. And they have not just groups that are open to their members. Our previous church was open to having community small groups that were facilitated by the church. And only that church, typically. There might have been like a conference or something that they hosted, but most of the time it seemed very close knit, and it was only open to people who were members of that church. And yet, Libby and I have seen so often that at our friend's church, people can sign up to use the buildings so long as they go through proper channels and they actually request it and everything. They will have access to the buildings, to the gym, to whatever it is that they need to do. If they need to have a space to hold a meeting or maybe even a little conference or something like that, it's available. And Ben even looked at me and he said, that's actually one thing that I like about our church is we don't really see the point in having these buildings here that we have and have them only be used like 2 or 2.5 days the entire week. And as things have moved more and more towards tribalism, where you can't trust the outsiders, you have to only trust what's within your own insular community, I have seen more and more hypocrisy. And there are so many examples where these people say that they love Christ and that they believe in a loving God. And yet they can be some of the most unaccepting people that I have ever met. I had an interesting conversation with a family member where I was talking about some of the things that my gay friends have been talking about and what they've been experiencing. And this family member just looked at me and said, I don't have any gay friends, so I don't know. And yet, this is also someone who has told me in the past that they have voted for our current president, someone who is outright anti-trans, and the lifestyle of my gay friends is an agenda, and it's an agenda that needs to be stopped, to the point where I have 2 gay friends who are engaged and they want to get married, and will say that they do get married. Is it going to be recognized? Is it going to be honored? Here in Washington State, I certainly hope so, being a much more progressive state. And yet, I already know of so many Republican states that are pushing legislature through. I believe Idaho is a great example of this, where they are wanting to pretty much not acknowledge gay marriages anymore. And to me, this is an example of hypocrisy, because there are so many people who say that they love individuals, and yet I never see any love coming from them. If I remember correctly from the teachings of Jesus in the Gospels, one of the things that he often said of the Pharisees, I think it's coming to me now, the Pharisees were getting on the disciples' case about not washing their hands before they ate their food. And Jesus pretty much turned to them, called them hypocrites, and said, what you eat doesn't make you unclean. And it's what is on the inside that makes you unclean. And that the Pharisees and these religious leaders, they were spending all of their time trying to make themselves look good while they were absolutely corrupt on the inside. And that was an example of them being hypocrites. And here we have people saying that they have a loving God and they hate other people. They hate people who do not belong to their tribe. That's one of the things that makes it really hard for me to even mention that I used to be a Christian. I have experienced more love and more acceptance from people who are not in the Christian community than I have from people in the previous Christian communities and churches that I've been a part of. Now, that's not everyone. I do want to make that abundantly clear. It's not everyone. However, it's what I am seeing in abundance these days. I am seeing people who are wanting to do the bare minimum to help someone. And I realize this can be a controversial point here, but I'm going to say it anyways. I have been that person, and I still hear from a lot of people that when you're going through something troubling, they will say that they will pray for you. And it has also been said that prayer is one of the best things that you can do for someone, because you are effectively invoking the powers of an almighty deity to come in and help with a situation. Well, I have found that to be incredibly untrue. What good are the prayers of people when you don't have enough money in your bank account and you lose your house or you lose your apartment? Or maybe you do have enough to cover that basic expense, but now you can't put gas in your car, or you can't put food in your pantry, in your fridge. But I will pray for you. That is the least that they can do. And I'm going to use myself as an example here. Again, I feel like I have been bashing the Christian church a lot in many of these episodes. And I'm going to bash myself here. I will use myself as an example. There have been unhoused individuals that years and years ago, they were panhandling, and maybe I would hand them like a $5 bill or a $10 bill or something like that. Most of the time, what I would do is I would tell them that I was praying for them. And what would happen is, as soon as I drove away, I completely forgot about them. I might have said a prayer in that moment, just asking God to help them. But where were my hands in helping these people? Where was my action? I could have done more. Now, I also want to put a caveat in here, because with my upbringing, this is something that has been really hard for me to reconcile with from time to time. There is also a dynamic at play here that we can't help everyone all the time. We only have so much that we can give in terms of time, in terms of energy, in towards of money, in towards wow, okay, that's good English. Yet we only have so much that we can give in terms of our money, our energy, our time, and we can't give to everyone. Yet, I know of so many Christians that will give to their church, and then that's all that they give. They do not give anything beyond that. And based on their teachings, one of the reasons why the early church was so powerful and grew as quickly as it did is because they were meeting the needs of so many downtrodden people. They were working together in order to share and help a lot of the less fortunate, while also taking care of themselves. I don't see many Christians doing that anymore. They give to their church, and maybe their church has some kind of community outreach. Yet, I know there are so many people here who are experiencing a lack of housing. They don't have a job. There's little that they can do in order to take care of themselves and meet their basic needs. And yet we have so many people in so many churches that are spending their time, their money, and their energy in order to reach outside of their own community. To me, that's a sign of hypocrisy. I have worked with men who have struggled financially, and their Christian family members and their Christian church has done very little to help them. And maybe that's more of a phenomenon here in the US, where it's always a pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You need to buck up, you need to work hard, you need to do X and Y in order to get to this destination. You need to follow this formula. And I am also learning how much that's something that doesn't work for a lot of people. I am reminded of how there are so many people in the coming generation that are not going to be able to even afford to rent an apartment. I had seen examples of people who were putting ads in newspapers effectively for a roommate to share a bed with, because they were living in a one-bedroom apartment and this one person could not afford the one-bedroom apartment. So they needed someone else to come in, and they would effectively share a space in order for them to meet just the basic needs of having a roof over their head. I currently live in a society where the cost for housing has about tripled in, gosh, I forget how many years it is. I heard a stat a couple of months ago, but like compared to maybe it was the 70s or even the 80s, the housing cost and the cost to rent has tripled. And the standard of living has increased for so many people, and yet wages have been stagnant for so long. They have not really grown a whole lot. That's a problem. And we currently have a presidential regime with a president who calls himself a king. He literally said, "Hail to the king," just this last week at the time of this recording. We have a president and we have conservatives that are being funded by billionaires that are trying to do everything that they can in order to just make things harder for individuals like me. We have had our second scare since January, and we're now getting towards the end of February, that we are going to lose our medical insurance. And I have no doubts that if they were to have their way, I would not be able to get affordable health insurance. As a small business owner, I wouldn't. That's hypocrisy to me. That is an example of people who say that they want to help, and then the only thing that they do is cause pain. They hurt. Why? Because They have a very different model of how society needs to be. And if you don't fit within that model, then they're not going to do anything to help you. For me, a big thing that is an example of hypocrisy are people who talk a big talk and then they just do not walk it out. I have so many examples of people who say that they want to help and they don't. They don't make themselves available. I have, in my experience within the Christian church, I have had so many people who have said that they would be there for me. And granted, some of them have. I had some good friends in a church small group who helped me move into this house. And yet I've also had experiences where individuals have said that they would be there for me, and I would try and reach out to them for, sometimes I just needed a conversation, I just needed to talk with someone, and they were never available. They just turned out to be hollow words to placate me, so to speak. This is something that I grow very weary of. I really do. I was listening to a podcast earlier today. The podcast is called Thank God I'm Atheist, something that I was introduced to through the How to Heretic podcast. Great podcast. I highly recommend both of them. I wish that the How to Heretic was still going, but it was something that the three people hosting it couldn't do anymore because it was more of a pandemic project and then their lives just got too busy. However, they brought to my attention, and I actually did some looking up on this, that there is this coalition that is endeavoring to put a cross on the moon. And the whole reason for it is so that they can get a message out there of the importance of Jesus Christ to the universe. And I have no doubts, I really have no doubts that these people are going to work in order to get a cross on the moon. And to date, this was a project that started January 1st of 2024. And here it is, getting towards the end of February 2025. They have already spent over $200,000 in order to try and make this goal happen. Much of this was spent on Bitcoin. A lot of it was spent on marketing. A lot of it was spent on not a lot. Some of it was spent on registrations and licenses and donations. They actually have on their website a treasury page to just look at where they're spending the money. And I can't help but wonder, instead of endeavoring to put a cross on the moon, a cross that I have no clue even what it's going to be made out of, I can't help but wonder if that money could be better used elsewhere, could be better used to help some of the people who are hurting around them. There are so many people today who are hurting because of a message. There are so many people who are suffering, and the only thing that they're given is words. And to me, that's just not right. It's absolutely not right. That's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how it should be. And I cannot tell you how many times I will still feel shame for having been a part of that group. I cannot tell you how many times I will get a knot in my stomach because I used to be one of those people that did the bare minimum of just saying, I will pray for you. I will invoke the powers of an invisible being in order to make your life better. I cannot tell you how many times I have felt shame for even admitting that I used to be a Christian. I have friends who are Christian and they never bring up that they are, because they would rather have their lives be an example instead of their words. This is what I mean when I talk about hypocrisy. Rarely, there is nothing that gets me more riled up than if I see an example of hypocrisy. In fact, I would even say that probably the only subject that gets me more riled up is human trafficking. On the heels of the last episode, where I was talking about using your voice, here I am trying to use mine to pull into your attention, if I'm generous, a public nuisance. I'm trying to bring to your attention something that has really just caused more harm than it has any benefit. Refer back to examples. I've talked about purity culture. I've talked about sex. I've talked about money. Even talked about politics. Talked about examples of acceptance and love and loving yourself. There's a reason why I have so many things to talk about when I get in front of this microphone and this camera. It's because I have had to do a lot of work to unravel these very harmful messages that have made me hate myself, that have made me not connected to my body, that have made me hate my sexuality, that have shown me, quote, shown me that I was a terrible husband, that I was not a good enough son or brother. That it was wrong for me to express emotion. That I needed to show more devotion to some invisible, maybe even non-existent being. Again, I'm agnostic. I don't have the answers. I don't know what the answers are. But I had to show more love and commitment to an invisible being than to anyone who was legit right in front of me. I still have, if you couldn't tell, things that need to be unraveled around my Christian upbringing, around my own hypocrisy. I've had to be honest with myself in many ways of how I've hurt people. I've already mentioned this before, but my friend Jenna, who I don't even know if she's still around, but a trans woman from high school who came out late in high school or just after we graduated. I was that foolish, pig-headed individual who looked at her and said, I am called to love the sinner but hate the sin. And I was, at the time, believing that I was saying that, and that was the most loving thing I could say. Hey, I still love you, but I don't accept these decisions and these choices that you're making. But I still love you. And it wasn't until I had some homosexual friends and I was on the other end of my Christian faith and I was deconstructing that I learned that that statement is not a loving statement at all, because these individuals who identify as other than cisgendered, these people have that as a part of their identity. My friends who are gay, if I were to say that I love you, but I can't accept that you're gay, I can't accept them. Because them being gay is just like me being white. It's like me being a cisgendered man. People who are transgender, if I were to say that I love you, but I cannot accept you as transgender, then I'm not loving them. Because them being transgender, it's not a choice. It's who they are. And if I cannot accept them for who they are, then I can't love them. There is still so much of my own hypocrisy that I need to unravel. And whenever something like this comes up, I am constantly doing work to unravel it. Because I am a much better person now than I ever was as a Christian. I was so focused on my own tribe. I was so focused on the agenda of getting more people to come to Jesus and to love him. And essentially, I was more focused on getting these people to not go to hell, that I was just not loving them, period. And I don't want to do that anymore. I do want to love people where they're at. If you are Christian, I accept you for where you're at. And I love you. If you're not Christian, I accept you. And I love you for where you're at. If you are doing harm to other people in the name of your beliefs, I will not support you. I will be as critical as I am to the man that I used to be. This is still me becoming the hero of my own story. And it is my hope that this is something that can also help you to become the hero of your own story. And until next time, live strong for today.